Hi. Today my video is about answered prayer. Um, it's a really touchy subject, faith and prayer. I mean, people have basically walked away from God because they never got their prayers answered, or so they thought. Right? There was a time when Jesus walked into a town, and it said that he could not do many mighty works there. Not some, but many mighty works there because of their unbelief. Unbelief is a very potent thing. I tell you, it's not only is displeasing to God in so many ways, but it has this potency in the place of the outside of God being able to. And I don't think as much as it limits God, as much as it creates a line, a force field of limit to prevent anything from coming in, anything that's good. When people are inside the house per se of unbelief, they could have a whole bunch of faith, but it can actually what is going on in the environment can change that person's environment so much to prevent, to limit the outside workings of God from coming in. You know, there was stories of old where it said that little children prayed for help, and they prayed, and they grew up and they said, I remember praying and God never answered my prayers, right? Well, the fact of the matter is that a lot of them did grow up, and even though they didn't see the working out aspect of that specific prayer being answered at that moment, there was so many other things that happened in their life that would have been their guidance system because of God's kindness. They reached out to God, right? Now, one thing I slowly started to discover years ago is this thing called authority. Okay, getting back to a little child praying. When a little child is inside of an environment, let's say it's parents or even step parents or whatever it is, the people who actually own that environment becomes the rule, the government of the environment. And for for God to begin to step into the environment, there must be something of a higher authority. A child can't do it. That's why your children are being shadowed or foreshadowed even by their parents. It will affect their faith life in God. And one thing that begins to happen is that we don't see a lot of things that go on in the invisible world. But if you have parents that are limiting by sending out information, they even said that people use, there's the activity of neurons, the invisible aspects, electrical impulses of the brain that sparks the environment to have substance. When the substance is of a certain type, it cannot be it cannot be conducive to God answering. Where am I going with this? I'm trying to encourage you. It takes it takes a certain amount of outside information, heavenly information, to change the environment before God can answer. Okay. Another thing that how God answers, he answers through his language. If you are more grateful and you begin to, Jesus said this, he says, if you basically, when you come to God to ask for something, believe that you have received it and you shall have it. He said, let's go further. He goes, if I tell you, if you were to look on a mountain and tell it to be removed and cast in the sea, and never doubt, in one inkling of doubt in your heart, it shall be done. Is it that simple? It is. Do you know what makes it so not simple? Is a complication, the complexity that mankind tries to put upon the simple facts of God at work in the environment. When God comes into the environment, assuredly, so does his good stuff. Now, one thing that is necessary that I mean, and it does, it, you will have to initiate an army if you're having, and you require some answers of prayer. You're going to have to initiate an army bigger than the one that's initiating unbelief in your environment. It would be advisable to get hold of people that you would go into a church and ask and get them to pray with you. Okay. Another way to do it too is that Jesus says this kind of faith, and he's talking about a kind of faith where demons are involved. And he said this kind of faith is needed to cast them out. There are invisible entities who in the invisible world sees what is coming. They can move you. They can move you. They can displace you from the point of contact when you're going to have your prayers answered. Some prayers, it may happen. You may make it happen. You may make that prayer today, and it may take a week to 2 weeks, sometimes a month. In the meantime, you do learn so many other things that you wouldn't learn any other way. You learn to have faith in God, which means complete confidence in him and his character until Jesus said this. He says, have the faith of God, God's faith, right? Do all this happen overnight? It takes time. For some people, they can actually hit the right stuff inside of them. Stuff that may be happening even years before they don't see that prepared them for that moment, and they make a prayer and it happens like boom, immediately. We live in a world that is charged by so much nonsense, negativity, negative leanings away from God, attitudes that are not going to contribute any kind of answer. Sometimes God does not answer. I mean, if the Bible says he will not answer if we enjoy iniquity. And people get stuff happen to them so many ways and so many times in their life. And some people come along and say, "Oh, God's been blessing me," but yet their character is not changing, nothing else. No, well, they could have. Jesus put it this way. He says that where your heart is, there, wherever your treasure is, there your heart will be also. People they can execute a certain amount of heart faith to get their treasures that they want, but it doesn't bring them the kind of fulfillment as what the true treasure brings you. Does God answer all prayers? Nobody answers the person who has the right kind of faith. Prayers can go in so many different dimensions, whatever we may call it: plea, asking, begging, pleading. And by the way, another thing too, I'm learning and still discovering, God, although he looks down with mercy upon those who will beg and plead, his language still is a language of confidence and faith. And sometimes to be able to have the answers happen, you have to walk away from the environment, and that takes a certain level of bravery. For some reason, God seems to like bravery. There are stories of so many different people throughout history that took great acts of faith, and years after the fact that they took those big acts, those risks, things worked out. Some people said that when I pursued my dreams, the money came out of nowhere, that things began to happen. One of the things, we as human beings, we are social contact creatures, and we've been trained that way. We've also to be trained to be a little bit too nice about what is harmful to us, because in part of trying to be of a good element, all in the avenue of having the goodness of God around us, we try to remain good and peaceful with everyone. One surefire way, and I've seen this, of people who will damage and injure your answers are your associations. Those people, they have a certain amount of activity going on in their life that will spill over into yours. That's why we do need to be extremely careful, especially when we require answers to prayer, who we're talking to, and don't. Gotta keep your mouth quiet. And secondly, who is in your immediate environment. Do you know it is true to the fact that I've discovered that something happens with people, they call it whether it be a vibe or a frequency. If you have people in your life, they're like, they like to truncate. They seem to be the ones who always seem to help you get back down to a lower vibe. When you start to hit a certain level in your life, these people will be there, and there'll be so many different ways they will use, or be used, I should say, by the enemies of faith, the invisible forces, to harm the consistency of peace. And the consistency of the flow is like a channel where God is able to answer through that channel, and they will block it. They block it. It's like a sink, running water through the sink. And if you have a certain amount of clump to get into the sink, it blocks it. They're like this. And so I'll just, I don't know how much I was encouraging to today, but never ever choose to depart from God, because prayers were never answered. There's no such things as prayers were never answered. Prayer may have been answered another way, or God is helping you to become a different person to meet the answer when it comes. And one of those kinds of people you may have to actually become is a kind that gets a little bit more aggressive toward those who are enemies of God's answers for your life. So I'm going to leave you with that, with this. All in all, we're consistently in a transitional stage, and we're changing. And one thing you learn in your life, you can look back years in the rear view mirror, and you remember where those times where you thought it was never ever going to have an answer, and then out of nowhere. Still learning. I'm still learning this too. What exactly happens? But when you get the right sequences take place in the spiritual world, things happen. And I advise you to do that, because I'm still learning it too. People who have learned to establish and understand how the sequences work in the spiritual world seem to get prayers answered in a very big way on a consistent level. Because God is in the business of sending out when we ask. That's why Jesus says, ask and it shall be given. It's a statement. That's all. It's a statement. It's a fact. Ask and it shall be given. Everything else that happens outside of that, that's up to you to take the journey and figure out, okay, what is it? What is it? What is the given part that's not happening? What is causing it not to happen? You all have a good day, and do like and subscribe. Thank you.